latest Supreme Court rulings. I'm Ernie Manous.
And I'm guest host Chau Nguyen. Houston has long been known as one of America's most affordable big cities, but is that reputation slipping away? We'll break down what the latest numbers reveal.
Plus, looking for a fun, affordable night out this summer? Miller Outdoor Theater is back with another season of free performances. From concerts and dance, Shakespeare, and family favorites, we'll help you make the most of this Houston treasure.
And as always, we want to hear from you. Give us a call or text us at 713-440-8870 or email us at talk@hellohouston.org. You can also watch us live on YouTube by going to houstonpublicmedia.org and clicking the purple box.
Hello Houston is made possible in part by founding sponsors John Bradshaw and Kathy Sanders, by Metro, and by gifts from listeners like you.
Live from NPR News, I'm Lakshmi Singh. The U.S. Supreme Court upholds birthright citizenship. In a 6-3 ruling announced today, the majority of justices rejected President Trump's executive order aimed at ending the long-standing principle that nearly all children born in the U.S., including those born to immigrants in the U.S. illegally or temporarily, are automatic citizens. NPR's Kerry Johnson describes how the majority of the court could have arrived at this major ruling.
There were ways for the court majority to get here. One was just to say, look at the words of the 14th Amendment, which are quite clear that subject to the jurisdiction thereof means you're here, you're born here on American soil, you're a citizen. Another way to get to this result would be to look to a couple of statutes that Congress passed much after the adoption of the 14th Amendment in 1940 and 1952. These were immigration laws that basically codified the same language that was in the 14th Amendment. And the justices could have found could have used those more recent laws as a basis to come to some consensus.
NPR's Kerry Johnson. The court ruled the Constitution guarantees automatic birthright citizenship. The court upheld state laws that ban transgender athletes from taking part in girls' and women's sports at public schools. It also loosened campaign finance restrictions. On social media, President Trump hails big GOP wins in these cases. On the birthright issue, he forwarded a right-leaning link saying Trump's ban may succeed with or without the Supreme Court. In other news, the president says he has not decided whether he will sign a bipartisan housing bill. Here's NPR's Stephen Basaha.
Speaking with reporters in the Oval Office, President Trump dismissed the housing bill as unimportant.
Big deal. It's a yawn. Some people say it's wonderful. To me, compared to the Save America Act, just about everything is a big yawn.
The Save America Act is Trump's election overhaul bill that would mandate strict proof of citizenship requirements. Trump said last week he wants that bill passed first. Republicans and Democrats in Congress overwhelmingly voted in favor of the housing bill last week. The legislation aims to encourage home building across the country to lower costs. Stephen Basaha, NPR News.
Ukraine launched another wave of attack drones into Russia overnight. More from NPR's Charles Maines.
Russia's defense ministry said its forces destroyed more than 400 Ukrainian attack drones in all. Yet the wider effects of a sustained Ukrainian drone campaign targeting Russian energy infrastructure continue to be felt. Several thousand miles away, drivers in Russia's Far East described long waits at gas stations as fuel shortages continued to ripple across the country. Russian President Vladimir Putin has acknowledged inconveniences to the public, but insisted the problem is far from critical. Charles Maines, NPR News, Moscow.
You're listening to NPR News.
Live from News 88.7 in Houston, I'm Matt Harab. Authorities are now saying that around 20 people had to be rescued from a balcony on the floor of an apartment fire that broke out in southwest Houston earlier this morning. That is up from the count earlier today. This was a 2-alarm fire. No injuries or fatalities have been reported. However, 16 units were destroyed. Officials have not said what might have started it, but again, there is extensive damage. U.S. Secretary of Housing and Urban Development Scott Turner visited Houston yesterday. The cabinet member highlighted a $100 million allocation from HUD for backup power generators at city facilities. He also addressed HUD's plan to limit the use of federal dollars to house homeless people across the country. The move is currently being blocked in court.
The Housing First model is a failed model. What is the root cause of homelessness? Mental illness, drug addiction. And so we want to make sure that we not only house people, but we treat people to get them healed and transformed. and then back to a life of self-sufficiency.
According to the Coalition for the Homeless of Houston and Harris County, which oversees around $70 million in HUD funding for homelessness, there are around 7,000 permanent supportive housing beds in the region. While the nationwide population of homeless people reached record levels over the past 2 years, the Houston area has held steady, though, at about 3,300 people on the streets or in shelters. Union workers at a Texas City chemical plants are on strike. They say Ashland Specialty Chemicals is slashing sick pay for senior employees and trying to replace union members with contractors. Lewis Crawford is a lead negotiator with the Texas City Metal Trades Council, which is representing the workers.
Membership has voted on 2 versions of this contract, and both times overwhelmingly turned it down, and we just want to get back to the table and fix all this.
Now, in a statement, Ashland says it is dedicated to the health and safety of its employees along with the community. 88 degrees right now here on the UH campus. Partly cloudy skies above us. A high of 94 later this afternoon. We'll get up to 95 tomorrow. I'm Matt Harrop, News 88.7.
Support for NPR comes from Strawberry.me, whose career coaches offer professional support to help people get unstuck, gain clarity, and move forward, whether advancing in a current role or choosing a new direction altogether. More at strawberry.me/public.
Live from Houston Public Media and News 88.7, it's Hello Houston, an open forum on today's biggest stories affecting Houston and beyond. Call now, 713-440-8870, or let us know your thoughts on today's topics by emailing us at talk@hellohouston.org. And now, Hello Houston. Hello there, Ernie Manous with you on this Tuesday morning. Seems like it should be later in the week already, but we're just at Tuesday, right?
You're just hoping, Arnie.
Just hoping. Chau Nguyen is sitting in with me today in the special guest host chair. Welcome back to the program.
Thank you, Ernie. It's good to be back on Tuesday.
On Tuesday. It just seems like, there's some of those weeks where they just seem like they take forever to get going, and other weeks where it feels like we've been in it for a year already.
Well, here's a tidbit. Today is the 30th, the last day of June.
That's good to know.
Isn't that crazy?
That went fast.
Feels like half the summer's over.
We may get to this, we may not get to it, but they have come up with a date for the Pride Parade that had to be rescheduled. That usually happens in June, and so as June ends and it hasn't happened, it's been rescheduled. It's going to be in August. We'll tell you more about that later, but I do think, wow, they got out of the heat of June into the heat of August.
I was thinking the same thing.
Good planning there. And it is hot. All across the country is going to have some very hot weather over the next few days. If you go out to celebrate your 4th of July, watch out. The heat index is going to be pretty rough, not just in our area, but across the country, it looks like. It's really hot.
Get those fans out.
Yes, but you have lots of fans. Very happy to hear that you're back with us.
Oh, thank you so much. It's so good to be back.
For folks that are curious, Chau Nguyen, I know that name. I do this to you all the time. Remind them of your pedigree.
So, originally from Houston, the product of immigrant parents. So
the product of
immigrant parents. Came here as an immigrant myself at age 2 from a war we call Vietnam, so Vietnamese immigrant parents. And grew up in Houston, went to college here, and then started working in the TV news business back in the day. So last with KHOU back in the 2000s. And now I'm a licensed clinical social worker, a graduate of University of Houston.
Well, all of those pedigrees are going to come in very handy on today's show because we're going to be talking about a lot. We're going to be talking about Houston because we're going to find out. We often talk about Houston being such an affordable city. Is it still such an affordable city? What about when it comes to housing and rental and all of that? We're going to have some answers for you on that. Loving Houston, we're going to talk about what's going on at Miller Outdoor Theater this summer, a free gift to the city. You can go and see shows for free, and they have wonderful programming and especially something big planned for the 4th of July. We'll be talking about what you can see this summer at Miller Outdoor at Herman Park. Also, we're going to talk a little bit about it's the anniversary of Andrea Yates. I do believe 25 years.
Can you believe that?
So we're going to talk and take a closer look at the insanity defense, what it really means, especially now with
Luigi Mangione.
Luigi, escaped my name, Luigi Mangione's defense. Also what happened with Rob Reiner and his son. What does this mean legally, clinically? We're going to find that out too. But a big part of what's going on today is what is happening with the Supreme Court. They got their final decisions down.
Right. The season ended in a slew of decisions that affect most of America, a lot of our communities.
Yeah. So we thought we would start right off with our headlines today. And to bring in and chat with us about it is Andrew Schneider, our politics and government reporter from Houston Public Media. Welcome, Andrew.
Thanks for having me.
So no surprise a decision was coming today, especially since it was the end of the session and they try and get all their decisions out. And the one that people had been waiting for has been decided, birthright citizenship.
Right. And that was literally the last decision of the term. It came down to a very close division, an odd division. Some of the people that I was watching on SCOTUS blog were describing it as 5.5 versus 3.5 because you had 5 justices led by Chief Justice John Roberts that voted to uphold birthright citizenships, ruling that President Trump's executive order limiting it flew in the face of the 14th Amendment. There was a partially concurring, partially dissenting opinion by Justice Kavanaugh, which found that the order was barred by statute, but not by the Constitution. And then there were another 3 justices that dissented on constitutional grounds.
So net, it means?
Net, it means that people who were born to parents who were in this country without lawful documentation or who were here on temporary visas are now safe. This is something that cannot be altered barring a fresh constitutional amendment or a change in the makeup of the Supreme Court.
For all intents and purposes, you are born here, you are a citizen. End of story.
Yeah, there are some narrow exceptions based on in terms of like if you're the child of a diplomat, then you have the parentage of you have the citizenship of your parents. But that's largely where things stand now.
713-440-8870. What do you think of this ruling? Were you concerned? Were you worried it was going to go a different direction? If it had, what would that have meant for this country? Are you on the other side where you think, you know what, I'm all great and fine with when you're born here, you're a citizen of this country, but if you just fly in to have a baby here, that was the big argument that the other side was pushing for, that shouldn't entitle you, birth tourism, I think they called it. Or if you are born from illegal immigrants who broke the laws to be here, should you have those same rights? What are your thoughts on that? What the Supreme Court has said is it does not matter if you are born on our grounds and you are a citizen of our country.
Right. And they had an interesting array of arguments that they based this on. They went all the way back to English common law, talking about how in Great Britain, then England, if you were born in England, you were considered a subject of the crown, and therefore you were an English subject, and that came by you naturally. The primary Supreme Court decision that they based this on was U.S. versus I believe it was Wong Kim Ark. A decision that came down in the late 1890s. This was at a time when the United States had limitations on people who were born here to people who were of Chinese origin could not become citizens. However, the child of 2 Chinese immigrants who was born here sued, arguing that under the 14th Amendment he had citizenship, and the justices agreed.
His great-great-grandchildren have been interviewed. I may be a grade off there about it and consider this quite a victory. And they said, their relative had never meant to go out there and be a symbol for anything other than to do the right thing, and that they are honored today that his name and his quest for citizenship has been upheld by the Supreme Court, too. That was a beautiful story.
Andrew, I'm curious about something because I know a lot of eyes were on this decision, especially here in our city, a lot of undocumented immigrants with children who are born here. Can this amendment be reconsidered in Congress in any form or fashion? I think the Supreme Court was looking at congressional amendments from the 40s and 50s. Can you elaborate on that?
Sure. There were 3 basic questions that I was asking the constitutional scholars I was interviewing within the last hour. One was what the majority based its decision on. One was what the dissenters were basing their arguments on. And third, are there any grounds for President Trump to try something else to limit birthright citizenship? And the point that he made was that even the point that the scholars that I interviewed made was that even if statute were changed, you would at most flip one justice, and that by itself probably would not be enough. You would need to have at least two justices change or be replaced that would be in favor of this. By and large, what's the law of the land here is what's established in the 14th Amendment and under the previous precedents.
So if I'm understanding this correctly, the only way at this point this could be changed is through a constitutional amendment. It couldn't be just a law passed, because we've already said constitutionally this is what we must follow.
That's exactly right, and that's a very high bar to clear. Yeah. It takes a supermajority in both houses of Congress, or more than a supermajority of states, in order to bring that to the fore, and it's far from clear that there's anything like that level of support.
Right. So if people are thinking, well, they can just pass a law that's... No, you can't, because we've interpreted constitutional law, which is the highest level in our country, and that has been said that people born here are U.S. citizens.
I imagine a lot of people are breathing a sigh of relief, especially children of undocumented immigrants here in our community and around the country. It feels as if what you're saying, Andrew, is we are in status quo, and to overcome another hurdle of a constitutional amendment would take years.
Right. And it's worth bearing in mind that this is not the only immigration-related case that came down. There were several others that came down in the opposite direction. One of the ones that I was looking at late last week was the decision with regards to temporary protected status, which went against immigrants who are here on temporary protected status. So there are very sharp divisions on the court. I think this was just a step too far for those who favored strict interpretation of the Constitution.
The administration argued for against the birthright citizenship because of the fact, one of the things that they made a big issue about was this whole birth tourism. From the dissenting opinions that you've seen and understand, did they address that? And I know that there's been research done, and I do believe of all births in this country in a given year, it's 0.3% of births are from people who don't reside here.
Yeah, the entirety of the decision was close to 200 pages long.
So you haven't had a chance to read it all yet?
I have not had a chance to read it in that level of depth. I do know that the dissenters were raising the point that there had been previous exceptions recognized under the 14th Amendment, but largely what they were talking about, the three justices that were arguing separate from Justice Kavanaugh, was on the grounds of allegiance rather than jurisdiction, and without getting too deep into the weeds. It raises the question of, existing exceptions for what had been, previously before American Indians were recognized as citizens of the United States. They were held to hold allegiance to their tribes rather than to the United States.
A quick question. Totally, and I want to remind everyone the phone number if you want to jump in on this conversation, 713-440-8870. We're talking with Andrew Schneider, who's our government and politics reporter. Taking off the legal hat that we're forcing you to wear right now and put on your politics hat, how much of this do you think it didn't matter that the Supreme Court did not vote the way the president wanted? He needed this ruling, so it gave them energy going into the midterms to say, look at how they're fighting against what we want as people. It's a rallying cry for conservatives to get out there and vote.
I would say that's entirely plausible. President Trump came into office having promised that he was going to deport record numbers of immigrants.
Right.
He's been trying every single avenue that he can to fulfill that promise. He can now and is likely to point to justices, including his own appointees, because Amy Coney Barrett was one of the people who voted with the majority, and say, this Supreme Court is going against the will of the people, and will lump them in with people that he opposes.
Nothing unites the mob better than an enemy to attack, and if they feel like they're under attack from something, it motivates a party to get out and vote if they can spin it the right way.
Exactly.
We have a lot of chatter on YouTube right now. Wine Goddess Texas is saying this is a moment of sanity from the current Supreme Court. Good way to finish. My British computer guy is saying this is a win for the Constitution for sure. A question, they keep talking about birth tourism, but there are actual records about how often that happens.
That was I was referencing.
Yeah,
it's extremely small. It's a very small.
And I've heard it anecdotally. I lived on a U.S. Commonwealth named Saipan near Guam decades ago, and there were a lot of Chinese citizens who would have babies there. And the talk was they were having babies so they could have U.S. born babies.
Right.
So it does happen.
Horribly named anchor baby concept that you have a baby here that'll hold you in this country. 713-440-8870. James from Cyprus is on the line. James, what's on your mind?
I just want to say I work with a lot of, for obvious reasons, I can't say where I work. I work with a lot of undocumented immigrants, but long story short, a lot of them are having kids so they can extend their visas here, and this is a huge win for them just from a moral standpoint, because it would absolutely suck separating kids from their parents solely because they just don't have papers to be here.
Well, James, I hear what you're saying. I can't say that it hasn't already happened quite a bit in this country of separating children from their parents. In the second hour, Seth Chandler from UH Law School is going to be here with us, and he can dig in a little bit more to the legality of what this means if you have a child here and your child is an American citizen and you are still undocumented. Does this help with anything legally? I would say the argument still is out there that it doesn't. But how do you rectify that? We can ask Seth Chandler about that in a minute. James, thank you for calling and sharing your thoughts with us. 713-440-8870. Peggy is on the line from Spring. Peggy, what's on your mind?
Hey, I just wanted to say truly thank God that the Supreme Court upheld birthright citizenship. And as soon as I heard it, all I could think about was Bruce Springsteen's song, Born in the USA. And it rings true today, and I am so grateful.
Peggy, thank you very much for calling and sharing. Andrew, while we have you here, this wasn't the only executive order impactful decision the Supreme Court had this session. There's been stuff about finance reform and presidential power. What are you gleaming from those stories?
This is really the biggest defeat for the executive in a term that went largely for the executive. One of the comments that I saw on SCOTUS blog, not just today, but in previous days leading up to the end of the term, was that this was a major theme for the term, the whole question of just how much power the executive should have. Mm-hmm. And it speaks to the success of the vetting, I think, that President Trump put his potential nominees to the Supreme Court through, that he was able to get as many wins as he did.
Amy Coney Barrett, people are looking at her, questioning where she falls on these things. She is still ultimately a conservative voice on the panel, on the court, but has surprised occasionally by siding with the more liberal point of view.
Yeah, one of the things that I noticed on some previous decisions is a lot of the people who were commenting online about this were talking about the fact that, like Elena Kagan, she came from a background as a law school professor, and that really does inform her opinions.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
All right, 713-440-8870. We're interested, concerned with what you think on this. As I mentioned, in the next hour, we will be talking about a whole lot more of the Supreme Court decisions and what it means as they wrap their session, and we continue ours. We're going to continue with Hello Houston. Andrew, thank you for coming in and chatting with us today and sharing your expertise.
You're welcome.
Coming up next, a research scientist with the Kinder Institute will join us to discuss the findings of a 2026 State of Housing in Harris County and Houston report. That continues right here on Hello Houston.
From the ocean.
Meet Tio Choco. We just took his keys for the day and gave him a Ride Metro fare card. This is his story. Visit ridemetro.org/Choco to find out where is Choco.
Records, U.S. airlines are carrying more passengers than ever. It's all testing the limits of the aviation system.
It's clear that the biggest threat to healthy and competitive airline industry, it's our short-staffed and woefully antiquated air traffic control system.
I'm Scott Detrow. Hear that story on the next All Things Considered from NPR News.
And that begins at 3 this afternoon on News 88.7.
On the TED Radio Hour, online shopper Aparna Mehta used to get a lot of packages delivered to her door.
Oh, per week? 12, 15. Whoa! Sorry, but I didn't think I was doing anything wrong. Look, the store is making it possible for me to order as many as I want and return back what I don't want.
Shopping and the state of fashion. That's next time on the TED Radio Hour from NPR.
You can hear that tonight at 9.
Wages went up during the pandemic, especially for lower-income workers. That wage growth is slowing, though, for one very significant part of the workforce in particular.
So for most workers, real disposable income is declining, but it is hitting women harder than men.
I'm Kai Rizdal. It is a gender pay gap, but it is bad for the whole economy. We'll tell you more next time on Marketplace.
Marketplace this evening at 6:30.
Support for Houston Public Media comes from Central Market, offering sweet ways to celebrate the 4th with in-house cut watermelon and ripe Lorian peaches to ice cream and freshly baked pies. More at centralmarket.com.
And now back to Hello Houston. To comment on today's topics, call or text 713-440-8870 or email us at talk@hellohouston.org. Now here's Ernie Manous and guest host Chau Nguyen.
Well, housing affordability continues to be a major issue across the Houston area, with rising costs affecting renters and homeowners alike. A new report from the Kinder Institute takes a closer look at the latest housing trends in our area and what they mean for Harris County residents. So joining us now is Dr. Stephen Sherman. He is a research scientist with the Kinder Institute, here to discuss the findings from the 2026 State of Housing in Houston and Harris County. Dr. Sherman, welcome to Hello Houston. So we were just talking before the break. Housing here is good-ish, bleak-ish. What's your take?
Yeah, so we've done this. First of all, thank you for having me. Secondly, we've done this report now since 2020. And usually the news is house prices are going up, rents going up, home prices going up, rents going up. That, in the most recent data, there's sort of been a plateau, both for rents and for home purchase prices. And yet, you're still finding all of these other signs of renter and homeowner stress. I'll start with renters. We now have crossed this threshold where a majority of renters in Houston and Harris County are cost burdened, meaning they're spending more than 30% of their income on rent. That's a Rubicon we've now crossed. Additionally, renter household incomes have actually decreased nominally without accounting for inflation. So even though, and eviction rates also remain very high. So even though you might look at the numbers and think, hey, it doesn't look so bad, when you start to look at other signs, all these other signs of stress appear.
So let me jump in and remind everyone, if you want to join the conversation, the number to call is 713-440-8870. Just to set the table, too, when we talk housing affordability, we all think home prices, but it's a bigger picture than that. Explain what you mean by that term, too.
Yeah, so the first thing I always say, and I'll repeat this till I'm blue in the face, is that Houston is a renter's city. 60% of Houston households rent. There was about an 8% increase in the renter population, not households, but people living in rental properties in just 1 year. So that's like the first thing I say is that, don't look at home prices, look at rent first, especially if you're talking about the city of Houston proper. Secondly, affordability is more than a function of just the cost of the home, if we're talking home buying. So like rents, home prices have also plateaued, but a lot of other costs associated with home ownership continue to increase. Inflation means larger costs for basic services and repairs. There's also, we talk about this in our report, the meteoric rise in home insurance costs. They increased 17% in just 1 year, and that was after they increased, I believe, 30% in the 3 years prior, 30 or 40%, quite a bit. So that continues to go up. And, you need homeowners insurance to have a home. And additionally, to compounding bad news is this matter of the expanded floodplains.
Right.
So earlier this year, FEMA released updated maps finally for Harris County. And now more than a quarter of housing units in Harris County are in one of the FEMA designated floodplains. That means that flood insurance costs, which are separate than home insurance costs, people here in Harris County know that, are going to increase. More households will need to have flood insurance per the conditions of their mortgage, per federal regulations.
Will banks still give loans for a home that, since so much more of our area is in a flood zone? I used to remember the old adage, they're not going to fund you if you're in a flood zone. You got to get a place out of it. Is that true? Because I would think that would really cripple the industry. May not be in your area.
Yeah,
I'll forward it with that. But.
I mean, that's a good question, and I think that's a question that I wish there was another guest here that was someone from a bank that could answer that, because I'm curious too. I'm also curious what that means if, let's say, you already have a mortgage, your home's not in the floodplain, but now it's in the expanded floodplains. Does that mean you have to buy insurance or not? Right. I think a lot of that has to go to they're starting to look at risk defined differently, flood risk defined differently than the FEMA flood maps, because everyone here in Harris County knows those are not a fully accurate representation of flood
and most
risk.
of us follow them no matter what at this point.
And if you can afford it, you get flood insurance, and that's a big if.
So it sounds like Houstonians right now are making do with this financial stressor that you're talking about: higher insurance rates, higher rental prices, financial stress, paying more than that 30% share. What does this mean for the future of Houston residents and housing? How do they make do then?
Well, more and more people are likely to continue renting. I'll speak personally. I'm 42. I have 2 kids under the age of 5, and we continue to live in a 2-bedroom apartment because guess what? Buying a home is expensive, and I'm also busy, and it's kind of nice just to call somebody if there's some water issue, and my landlord, who's very diligent, will come and fix it. Yeah. On that related point, one of the things that we highlight in this report is the growth of single-family rentals. You're seeing that market expand in the Houston area, outside of Harris County in particular, but also inside, where you're building new subdivisions for rent. The largest homeowner here that we found in Harris County in terms of like a single company was a build-to-rent construction company. More than about a quarter of Harris County single-family homes are rentals. So you think about a single-family home as being something occupied by an owner-occupier, and that's less and less the case. And I think that you might start to see more conversions as home ownership becomes perhaps a riskier and or more prohibitive.
We've had realtors on the show before, and they'll talk about the prices of houses going up, and they always dress that as that's a very good thing. The value is going up. It's important to have these higher values, increases X, Y, and Z. Your report seems to be looking at it from a different point of view, and one that seems more logical to me, that if you keep raising prices on things, it necessarily isn't an economical good thing.
Yeah, I used to work in the public sector, not in Houston, but in another city. And the question that I would raise in different public meetings is who's going to buy your home? I also have heard, in conversations about housing affordability with economists, their retort would usually be, this isn't just a housing issue, this is a labor issue. And I kind of scoffed at that a little bit. And I thought, well, yeah, it is a labor and wage issue. So when you look at the fact that renter household incomes are going down, again, increasing home prices, that's more value, that's more equity. But who's going to buy your home? It's
Right.
not a liquid asset.
The math doesn't add up. And I think there's an illusion of being a homeowner is fulfilling this American dream. But the American dream doesn't posit that you have to go into debt, right? So it makes more common sense.
An eye roll there.
Yeah, there was a bit.
A little editorial there.
Listening in your cars can't necessarily see that.
But I think that's it has to be a cultural shift, right? Look, maybe being a homeowner, having to pay, especially in the state of Texas, you're paying property taxes, you're paying homeowners insurance, flood insurance, and then added cost of just inflation. It doesn't make common sense with the CENTS piece, right?
Yeah, and as I said, that's something that I think a lot of renters may see. And this isn't research that we've done, and I'll be honest, I'm speaking personally here, but, owning a home is expensive and very time-consuming. And deferring that labor and cost onto somebody else, sure, I'm not getting equity, but I think about the time that buys me, and that's very valuable.
Let's talk a little bit about the environment, the situation of being a city that is predominantly renters. Mm-hmm. And I would think on some level, ultimately, is that bad for a community to push in that direction? If more people rent, less people buy, does it start a system of less people buying, less people, more renters? Does that affect the community in general? Or is it a good thing because it gives people freedom of movement, more of lifestyle choices that they can enjoy as opposed to being tied down with a single property? What do you see in your research as to how these groups of people react to this situation, and ultimately how does it affect the city?
I think that'd be a really important question. I wish that my colleague Dan Potter were here, because he's the person that you probably had him on the show. No, you probably had, I'm like
Bring
pointing. Those of you listening, I'm pointing at the empty chair next to me and thinking about all the wonderful people who could contribute some wisdom here. But to go back to your question, Houston, this is the thing we think about Sunbelt cities. We think about northern cities, New York City. I'm from the New York metro area originally, predominantly renters in New York City. And you think about these Sunbelt cities, sprawling single-family homes, predominantly homeowners. And I think that what you're starting to see is that we're becoming more like New York City, right? Mm-hmm. We're becoming more like Chicago in terms of the share of our households which rent. What that means for the community, I think, is a really value-laden and loaded question that's hard for me to answer based upon what we've researched in our report, because we did not do that. But I do think that it's important that local policymakers think about renters as a constituency, right? Mm-hmm. Like, they are a political constituency. Sure, homeownership has a lot of financial benefits, but the people who are living here, majority of them in this city, are living as renters, and close to 50% in the county as well. It's not just Houston. And so I think that's like a sort of key that I wish I could turn.
But I think you answered my question in there, is that we need to start as a city, as an organization, looking at who our constituents are differently, that we're built on a model of homeowners, landowners are the ones who vote, go way back into our history. And what we have to realize is that the majority of folks in the city you're speaking to are those that face the challenges of renting as opposed to the challenges of owning.
I'm curious, did you also in this study look at the demographics of those who rent? Is there a younger sort of demographic like yourselves, young families or working class citizens? What are you guys looking at?
So I'll actually, one of the other major findings of the report, and thank you for that question. Actually, I'm going to speak to the home ownership side, which is obviously related. We looked at home ownership by race and ethnicity, and we found that for the four largest racial ethnic groups, Asian, white, Hispanic, and Black, there was a decline in homeowner households for all except for Asian, and there was a very large and noticeable decline in the number of Black owner-occupied households, 16% in just 1 year decline in Black owner-occupied households within the city of Houston proper. There was also a decline in overall Harris County, but if you account for the decline in Houston, there's actually a slight growth in parts of the county that are outside of Houston. I want to emphasize that this is something we're further researching. This is how we work as an institute. We find some troubling or curious data point, and then we go further into it. So we're starting to look at causes, and we can't say with confidence what those causes are. What could drive that could be migration, people selling their homes, people dying and the homes becoming a rental, a whole host of other kind of demographic factors. It's not as if these homes and these people just disappear. So that requires, I think, a lot of follow-up research. That's actually what we're currently working on. I was working on this morning.
I want to remind people we are speaking with Dr. Stephen Sherman, who's a research scientist with the Kinder Institute, about the findings of the 2026 State of Housing in Harris County and Houston report. And we'd love to hear from you. Give us a call or text 713-440-8870. I want to go back to something you said in passing, and I want you to define this so people understand when we say things like this. You were talking about decline in ownership. And I think an audience listening would automatically assume that means a negative thing, that less ownership is bad for a community. Is that what you mean when you say that? Is that necessarily a negative, or do we need to redefine how we look at that?
I think that's an important point. We do need to redefine how we look at it, but we also have to realize that when there are these very large declines, that means something for communities, right? Communities are going to change, and they're probably changing drastically, and I think very quickly when we see numbers like that citywide, well outside the margin of error for American Community Survey 1 year data. So I think that there is an important value question to ask, not necessarily good or bad, but what is changing? Is it bad? And how can we address it?
Mm-hmm. I know a while back, because I think Chau even brought this up, we always think ownership is the American dream. You want to get to that. A number of years back, we kind of started shifting our view on that. Mm-hmm. Are we finding people that rent are renting by choice or by circumstance?
I'm turning to the invisible survey researcher to my left.
I'm sorry.
No, I'm sorry. And I'm sorry. That's not something that we answered. But I mean, and I spoke positively because I can speak honestly for myself. And I'm saying for my case, it's kind of a choice. Sure, it'd be nice to have the money, but.
So you're looking at a 60-40 split in terms of home ownership versus home rentals. Is that a shift over decades? Did you look at sort of that pendulum shift?
I am having an upward diagonal curve motion I'm making with my right arm for those of you listening at home. It has gone up. There was a dip in the growth of renter households immediately after COVID in that buying spree period of low interest rates, people staying at home. That was like the 1 year where the growth in renters did not kind of increase. It kind of slowed down, but you've since have found that erased, that now we're continuing to increase.
281. What number am I giving? 713-440-8870. Kelly from College Station is on the line. Kelly, what's on your mind?
Hey, I'm from College Station. I'm always from College Station, but I do live with y'all now. So
okay, thank you.
When I first bought my property, I paid $143,000 for it. It was valued then at $143,000, and I think I was paying somewhere around $1,300 a year in taxes. I am now valued at almost $1 million. No changes in the house whatsoever. I haven't built a mansion. I don't even have a swimming pool, over ground or in ground, and my taxes are running almost $14,000 a year. So on top of the insurance, which now has become unsustainable for us, we just decided to just live without it. It's also the tax base has drastically changed. And, you know, while they keep revaluing the value of my home, I haven't sold it. So I'm not making any money on what they're revaluing it at, which makes it difficult to sustain the payments on it as an owner.
And thank you, Kelly, for that call. That could be a plausible answer into that shift that you're talking about, that pendulum shift, or the rise in home rentalship, the fact that homeowners can't afford the property taxes.
Yep, that's something that conveniently we're also currently researching, and I look forward to maybe being on the show a month or a year from now, the property tax issue for owner-occupiers. The short answer is yes, they have gone up a lot. And in previous years' State of Housing, we have looked at neighborhoods where prices have gone up, property taxes assessed value in the assessor records has gone up. And you do traditionally find a lag, that there are neighborhoods, particularly on the eastern half of Harris County, where homes were very, I would say, undervalued in the assessor data, where they would be valued for like $60,000, decent homes. And now they're starting to catch up with what their market value is, or maybe even exceeding it. And the problem is that the people living there can't afford that.
Yeah.
And I think what your caller is dealing with.
And I apologize if I'm going back to something you already said, but are we still viewing the old concept of folks rent until they can buy? Or is that changing in this renter population?
Well, I think another point, going back to some prior research we've done in the State of Housing, is that when you see people coming here to buy a home, perhaps also like Kelly the caller, they're moving from elsewhere. right? And they might have built up a nest egg in another city with perhaps higher incomes and move to Houston for work and are able to buy a home. That's particularly going to be the case for people coming from more expensive metro areas where home ownership in New York City or San Francisco, despite the increases in Houston, it's a lot harder there than it is here. So that's the other point, is like, it might not be people who are in Houston renting who are buying the homes. It may be people who are moving here from elsewhere as well. And that people are still migrating to the region.
All right. 713-440-8870. We have a call from Zach from Northwest Houston. Hi, Zach.
Hey, I had a question about specific demographic or like specific parts of Houston. If you guys did any research around people leaving like a specific part of Houston, or I just think about like the increase, especially in the high-rise rental apartments that have gone into downtown, if that's driving that move. And I know, like, personally, there have been people that I know have sold their houses because they want to be closer to downtown as, like, things change and people want to be closer to the action of things that are going on. But I'm just wondering if you guys did any research into the specific parts of Houston that are seeing that decline or those shifts with selling versus renting.
Zach, thank you for that call. So the Houston migratory patterns, what are you seeing out there in the wild?
That actually is not something that we did do research on for this recent state of housing. And it's also something we're looking at currently, which I was looking at this morning. This is really funny. About the point about new construction and new multifamily construction, and talking about your earlier point about what the historic trends are with renting. In 2017, per the American Community Survey data, U.S. Census data, that became the year that multifamily units outnumbered single-family units in the city of Houston. There's more living spaces with shared walls here than there are with unshared walls. And, that like building stock is the other thing that we have to account for here, that people may be moving, they may need less space, they may want less space, may not want to keep up with it. So the changing building stock, and that also is influencing more multifamily properties, means likely more renters. There's far more apartments than condos.
Well, that makes a lot of sense. Thank you so much, Zach, for your question. We're going to wrap it up. Dr. Stephen Sherman is a research scientist with the Kinder Institute, here to talk to us about the 2026 state of housing in Harris County. I believe we can read that Houston report on the website.
Yeah, if you go to kinder.rice.edu, that is the homepage for the Kinder Institute, and the research will be linked there.
Come back and join us again.
Thank you. This is great.
Yeah, very
I like
engaging.
Taking calls. Thank you for calling.
All right.
Coming up, it's going to be summer performances at Miller Outdoor Theater. What's coming? We're going to tell you. Stay with us as Hello Houston continues.
Good morning. Kylian Mbappe.
Meet Damola, songwriter, world-class violinist, and award-winning multi-genre artist. We just took his keys for the day and gave him a Ride Metro fare card. Visit ridemetro.org/Damola to learn more about his ride.
France facing Sweden. The Swedes will have their hands full, but we've already seen the unexpected in the playoff here at the tournament. Closing things out tonight, Mexico hosts Ecuador in a match loaded with stakes for Western Hemisphere pride. Monday's action featured 3 games, 2 penalty shootouts, and 1 shocking upset. Brazil scored 5 minutes into stoppage time to break a tie and beat Japan 2-1. The drama continued in the other games, though 120 minutes were not enough to settle things there. Both went to a shootout. Morocco edged the Netherlands on PKs in Monterrey, and favored Germany was beaten by Paraguay. Germany is a perennial cup favorite, but they have not made it to a round of 16 since 2014. Elsewhere, the United States team is now in the Bay Area preparing for tomorrow's game against Bosnia-Herzegovina. Defender Tim Ream says their mentality won't change heading into the knockout game Wednesday.
We put so much pressure on ourselves. We expect, great things from ourselves and good performances, and that doesn't change whether you're in the group stage or knockout rounds.
That game, Wednesday night in primetime. I'm Jimmy Moss.
Support for soccer tournament coverage comes from Vamos Verde. You can listen to our special World Cup episodes throughout the tournament, wherever you get podcasts.
Support for this soccer update comes from Karbach Brewing, makers of Hopadillo IPA, hosting summer soccer at Karbach, featuring live matches on a 14-foot LED screen along with internationally inspired food and drink offerings.
And now back to Hello Houston. To comment on today's topics, call or text 713-440-8870 or email us at talk@hellohouston.org. Now here's Ernie Manous and guest host Chau Nguyen.
If attending an outdoor performance with your family or friends is on your bucket list for the summer, then Miller Outdoor Theater has got you covered. Get the pun there because they got a cover of it. Wow. All summer long, the famous outdoor theater located at the heart of Houston's Sherman Park is offering up a lineup of free outdoor performances as they always do. Perfect for any Houstonian looking to enjoy an evening of culture this summer. Joining us to tell us all about their upcoming summer performances is Claudia DeVasco, Managing Director of Miller Outdoor Theater. Claudia, welcome.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
So now you guys are in it now. We're Chau and I were talking with you beforehand about thinking, summer is the time for Miller Outdoor. Not necessarily, but you do have great programming during the summer.
We do.
People probably are familiar with spring and fall because the weather is a little more calm. But my point of bringing all of that up is to say, you got fans, you got the coverage. If you're close to the stage, you feel the AC roll over you in there. And it's evenings, it's cooler. It's a nice time to come out to the park.
Exactly. We time our show starts with the sunset. So even when it's the hottest of summer, it's pretty bearable. And also, you come out, bring a picnic, cold drinks, and you can make it happen.
Yeah,
yes.
There's seating in the pavilion, but there's also still the very famous hill seating that people love.
I would say people prefer. I mean, it's really magical seeing these amazing performing arts shows under the stars with your picnic and family, and it's really special.
For those who haven't been to Miller Outdoor Theater, what do you tell them about coming and watching a free performance, which we really love, especially for families who bring children and such?
Yes, I mean, Miller truly is a gem. It is the only venue and the largest venue of its kind in the country. It is a true source of pride for our city. It is a city service. It is supported by the city of Houston through the Houston Arts Alliance and has been producing and presenting performing arts for 103 years.
Isn't that crazy?
Isn't that nuts? This is the 103rd season. And throughout that time, we've been sharing shows with the city of Houston. But what's really special about it and what makes it singular is that we produce high-quality professional performing arts from our local favorite groups, but also from touring companies from all over the world. And folks can come and show up as they are. They can reserve seats and see it in a traditional theater-style setting or bring a picnic and sit on the hill. And what I love about it as a mom is I can bring my young kids and they can come and experience the symphony, cirque shows, theater, jazz music, and do it without a lot of the pressure that we might often feel in an enclosed theater. Under the stars, they start getting exposed to the arts and is absolutely free all season long.
Before we get to programming, though, please explain how you can get tickets if you want to sit within the pavilion part of the outdoor theater.
Yes, so the current ticket policy, and it's been this way since COVID, is the day before the show. So if it's a Friday show, at 10 a.m. the day before, so Friday, Thursday morning at 10 a.m., we open up reservations on our website, milleroutdoortheater.com. Now, we don't open up and release all the tickets at that point because what happens is it's free and it's so popular, they go so fast, and we want to make sure that people who aren't able to log off of work at 10 a.m. or can't be online sitting by waiting for the tickets to access tickets. So folks can also pick up seated tickets an hour before the show begins. That's when our box office opens. You can go to the window, request some tickets, and then walk in. But I will also tell you there's a tradition at Miller. Once the show starts, the seats are open and up for grabs. So if someone
I'd say a few minutes before the show starts, you have your announcement, get in your seats. Otherwise, we open the seats.
Exactly.
And you can almost always get a seat.
I will say that everyone who's waiting in line to get those seats, they always get them. And sometimes you can get front row because if folks aren't seated in their seats, you go straight there and grab that seat.
I love that egalitarian.
Yes.
And I bring all that up just to remind folks because the old adage was noon the day of the show. That's when the tickets became available. But that's shifted, so everyone knows that now.
And it used to be in person, so if you couldn't
Right.
drive all the way to Herman Park, then you missed out.
Right. Now
But I love sitting out in the lawn, the picnic chairs.
That one you don't need tickets
No,
for.
you
Just
just
come to
show
the
up.
lawn when you're ready.
Bring your own root beer if you're a family.
Yes.
But not in glass containers.
Just no glass containers, but you can bring wine, just, not in a glass container. You can bring your own beer. We have our concession stand. You can purchase it there. It's an all-inclusive experience.
And
Okay,
then for
enough of that.
For my
What-
single friends, a great date night. Right?
Yeah.
The easiest, too. You can just show up.
Yeah.
That's great.
Regardless of all of that, what's on the schedule? What's coming? We've got the 4th of July is always a big day at Miller.
Oh, it's the biggest day, and it's coming up this weekend. So we kicked off our season with Juneteenth this past couple weeks ago. Oh, goodness. That was, 2 weeks ago.
It's the last day of June today.
Yeah. And for folks that are wondering why we didn't have March and May performances, we did have some construction. There's a new Gateway Plaza that folks can now take a stroll through, and there's shade structures. But we had to cut the season short. So our next performance is 4th of July this weekend with a Houston Symphony, the Salute, Summer Salute. And we have fireworks. And this year, if you look on our Facebook page and on our website, you can actually listen to the music that's synced up to the fireworks, even if you're not right in the theater. So that's something special that folks in the entire area will be able to experience.
Before we get into more programming, you mentioned online. You also offer performances online, which is a wonderful gift. Talk a little about that.
We do have a live streaming program, and it's accessible through our website and our social media. We try to live stream as many of the shows as possible this season. Some shows have restrictions due to union and other licensing rules, but for the most part, you can see online on the schedule to see which shows are live streaming and access it from home. This is great for folks with accessibility needs, or if it's raining and you didn't want to make the drive out from Katy.
Or it's too hot and you want to sit home and watch it in the AC, you can enjoy Miller Outdoor Theater performances at home, also free of charge.
Exactly, always free.
Okay, so we talked about 4th of July with the symphony. What else is going on?
Oh, there's really great favorites that we have coming back this year, from Mercury Chamber Orchestra to Houston Jazz Fest. But we also have 2 Cirque performances, one in August and another one closing the season, Cirque Calabante. There's a really fun night coming up in the fall called Neon Nostalgic 80s Music Television. They got the licensing to play the music videos, and 2 of the original VJs, don't ask me their names off the top of my head.
Oh, we're
They have to come in and be on the show, though. I want them on.
Oh, my God. Let's work it out.
Yes, I love that.
They'll be in
town. All the original VJs. Oh, that's awesome.
And then there is a really cool show that we're bringing called How Do You Like It, which was a program that was developed with PBS, with the guy who invented the Pandora algorithm. And so it's part concert, part TED Talk of explaining why do we like what we like and listening to those songs. And of course, other favorites like Classic Albums Live, Miller Summer Mixtape, which features local emerging artists, and so many more.
So Claudia, behind the scenes, I know there's a lot of work that goes on with the planning of these acts and performances. Are you booked basically a whole season ahead? It sounds like it.
We are, and we're trying to plan even further in advance, just because that's how far in advance a lot of these acts and our local organizations are booking. So this entire season is booked through the second week in November, and we've already started on 2027.
Wow. Something not to forget, it's an annual tradition for many, many folks, is the Shakespeare Festival.
Yes, and that's coming up at the end of July, early August. We have The Tempest and Comedy of Errors, and of course that's in partnership with University of Houston. It's been around for over 50 years. It was my first experience with Shakespeare growing up, and really was a big part of the reason I found a career in the arts. So it's really something special.
A lot of people talk about Shakespeare and the language and understanding it. You guys have a wonderful sound system was put in a few years ago, and it really does help with all that.
It does, and also just the quality of the performers making it accessible to people.
Okay, I'm a family, and I want to come out to Miller Outdoor Theater this weekend. Tell me about logistics and parking, etc.
Yes, so it's right in the middle of Herman Park, and all those zoo parking lots, so lots E and F right by the zoo, are accessible, as well as any of the lots surrounding. We encourage people to take the Metro, too. There's a Metro line that stops right there.
Right by you, yeah.
Exactly. We encourage, especially for 4th of July, for people to show up early, because folks make a day out of it. You come out, find a spot on the hill, picnic, and then wait for the show in the evening. But really, you could show up with an entire picnic and your family and a wagon like we do with a picnic blanket and chairs, or you can just show up with nothing and to usually find a seat under the canopy and get some snacks at the concession stand.
Okay, as we wrap this up, pick your favorite child this season. Not the ones that get all the attention, but a little hidden gem you think everyone should be aware of.
A little hidden gem that everyone should be aware of. Oh, I don't want to find favorites in our producing partner list. They're all so fabulous.
Well, you can find the full list at Miller Outdoor Theater. That's re.com. Go there. See all the wonderful things coming up. I'm going to try and, once we wrap this up, figure out from you who those MTV VJs are that are coming in. I'm going to try and get that out of you. Claudia, thank you so much for coming in. And not just thank you for coming in, thank you for what you bring to the city every year. This is wonderful, and we're so happy to have it. Claudia DeVasco is the managing director at Miller Outdoor Theater. And coming up, more of today's headlines. We'll be continuing our conversation. Also, psychiatric defense. We're going to find out what the history of that. Coming up in the second hour of Hello Houston, along with the Supreme Court rulings. More coming up after this.
Stay tuned. There's more Hello Houston on the way. For the latest in local news, subscribe to the Hello Houston daily newsletter at houstonpublicmedia.org. Hello Houston is a production of Houston Public Media. The opinions expressed by the guests of this program are solely their own and do not represent the views of management, staff, or underwriters of Houston Public Media. This is News 88.7.
This weekend, the U.S. celebrates 250 years since the founding. Our national narrative? The Boston Tea Party. Founders like Washington, Jefferson, and Madison, and colonists fighting the Revolution. Often left out, the rest of our history, that Native Americans were at the heart of the Revolution. A new podcast looks at what our history books recount and what they skip. It's next time on 1A.
Join us for 1A. It begins this afternoon at 2 on News 88.7.
This programming is made possible by Kevin Coolish and Beverly McPhail, supporting media that's free from commercial influence and grounded in journalistic integrity, because trust in news matters, now more than ever.
89 degrees at the University of Houston. The heat index right now is at 96. This is your NPR station, KUHF Houston News 88.7, a service of the University of Houston. It's now 12 noon.
Just ahead on this hour of Hello Houston, the session has ended, and UH Law Center's Seth Chandler is here to break down all of this year's Supreme Court rulings. I'm Ernie Manous.
And I'm guest host Chau Nguyen. The insanity defense is one of the most talked about and least understood concepts in criminal law. Today, University of Houston law professor Sandra Guerra-Thompson helps us separate legal fact from Hollywood fiction.
Plus, food trucks have become a Texas staple, but starting tomorrow, a major new state law changes how they operate. Will it make life easier for small businesses or create new concerns? Brandon Rottinghaus seeks answers in his latest Texperts.
Also, we want to hear from you. Give us a call or text us at 713-440-8870 or email us at talk@hellohouston.org.
Hello Houston is made possible in part by founding sponsors John Bradshaw and Kathy Sanders, by Metro, and by gifts from listeners like you.
Live from NPR News, I'm Lakshmi Singh. By a ruling of 6-3, the U.S. Supreme Court has upheld birthright citizenship. The decision breaks with President Trump, who signed an executive order barring citizenship for babies born in the U.S. to parents that either enter the country illegally or are in the United States on temporary visas. Here's NPR's Elena Moore.
Trump signed that executive order on his first day back in office last year and has argued that the Constitution does not ensure birthright citizenship. But that executive order quickly faced legal challenges, and it was never implemented, with lower courts instead saying the move was unconstitutional. Now the Supreme Court is backing that up, saying, quote, children born in the United States to parents unlawfully or temporarily present are subject to the jurisdiction of the United States and are citizens at birth under the 14th Amendment's Citizenship Clause, end quote. Elena Moore, NPR News.
On social media, President Trump suggests the ban could still be restored through a bill. Separately, he says the GOP scored a big win when the court struck down limits on how much political parties may raise and spend on candidates. NPR's Mara Leisen has more on that.
Republicans have a lot more money. This makes it easier for them to spend it. They don't have to use the old rules of no coordinating with candidates. They also are going to get lower rates to buy political ads on television. It's very much in concert with other things that this court has done around campaign finance. They believe that money is speech, and so that wasn't much of a surprise.
NPR's Mara Leisen. Republican New Jersey Congressman Thomas Kean Jr. is back at work after a more than 3-month absence that was unexplained until this morning. Here he is in a speech on the U.S. House floor.
When people hear the word depression, many people simply feel it means feeling sad. But depression is so much more than that. It is physical. It is emotional. And until you experience it yourself, it is difficult to fully understand how powerful this illness can be.
The UK's caretaker Prime Minister Keir Starmer says military spending is being increased by the equivalent of nearly $20 billion. More on that from NPR's Lauren Freyer.
The UK is around the middle of the pack when it comes to defense spending by NATO members. But as Russia gets more aggressive and the US less reliable, this boost would bring British expenditure up to NATO's target of 3.5% of GDP by 2035. Prime Minister Starmer says the UK military for too long
has been underfunded and unsuited
the threats that we face.
His plan includes nearly $7 billion for drones. The Royal Navy would become a hybrid force using AI-guided uncrewed warships and submarines. Starmer says some road and energy projects would be scrapped to pay for this.
That's NPR's Lauren Frere reporting. This is NPR News.
Live from News 88.7 in Houston, I'm Gail DeLauder. Local Hispanic civil rights groups are reacting now that the mostly conservative U.S. Supreme Court has upheld the 14th Amendment. It guarantees a right of citizenship to children of immigrants born in the U.S. Local Field Director Cesar Espinoza is pleased with the decision.
We still have a system in the United States of checks and balances, and the executive order that President Trump and the Trump administration had pushed for, in essence, ending birthright citizenship, was struck down today. And more importantly, the 14th Amendment of the Constitution was upheld.
Espinoza says despite the court's ruling, he still expects the Trump administration to try to get around the decision through new executive actions. Saturday will mark the one-year anniversary of the deadly July 4th floods. News 88.7's Sarah Gruno says people in Kerrville are paying their respects, but worried if the area is prepared for the next emergency.
Residents still have concerns about the flood warning system that's been installed along the Guadalupe River. Rebecca Murphy spoke at a community meeting in Hunt. She recalls the response to a 2015 flood in Wimberley, Texas, about 70 miles east of Kerrville.
The state, they did not fund warning systems. They knew we were at risk after Wimberley. A study was done.
This week, residents are paying respect to those who died in the deadly floods last year. Several events are scheduled this week in what's called a weekend of hope and healing, including community gatherings and the opening of a new park. More than 130 people died in the July 4th floods last year. I'm Sarah Gruno, News 88.7.
The Astros continue their series against the Minnesota Twins at Daikin Park tonight. First pitch is just after 7. For this afternoon, mostly sunny skies, high around 94 degrees. It should go down to about 79 degrees tonight. I'm Gail DeLauder, News 88.7.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Progressive. Progressive Commercial Insurance protects small businesses from retailers to tradespeople. Progressive covers a variety of business needs with a range of coverages. More at progressivecommercial.com.
Live from Houston Public Media and News 88.7, it's Hello Houston, an open forum on today's biggest stories affecting Houston and beyond. Call now, 713-440-8870, or let us know your thoughts on today's topics by emailing us at talk@hellohouston.org. And now, Hello Houston with Ernie Manous.
And hello there. I am not here alone, though. Chau Nguyen is sitting in with me today in the guest host chair. Hello, Chau.
Hello, Ernie. Good to be here.
Okay, here's the breaking news I got for you. So in the last segment, we were talking about Miller Outdoor Theater, and they talked about the 80s music television event, and that they were going to have 2 of the original MTV VJs there that night to host the show. We got it out of her. We know who they are. So you ready?
Yes.
It is Mark Goodman and Alan Hunter.
The OGs.
The OGs. If you remember when MTV started, you'll remember those names. Mark Goodman, Alan Hunter. They will be at Miller Outdoor Theater in October.
Which means you will be there.
Which means you will be there, too.
Yes.
I know you, Chau. We love our 80s music.
We do.
Anyway, so that's what we had to tell you about that. I also want to let you know a little bit later in the show, we are going to be talking about the psychological defenses of insanity. It's often tossed around. We hear a lot about it, but what does it really mean?
Intriguing, interesting, and a lot of legal depth there.
Right. So we're going to take a look at that, and that is coming up in just a little bit. But speaking of legalese, today the big deal is, all right, here we are. It is
Supreme Court rulings.
Dun, dun, dun. Supreme Court rulings came down. Our good friend Seth Chandler from the University of Houston is here with us. Hello there, sir. Are you there? Can you hear us?
Oh. I think he hears us. I'm not sure we can hear him.
Just so you guys know, I'm not hearing you.
Oh, we hear you now.
We can hear you. Can you hear us yet? No, he can't hear us. They're going to fix that, but we are going to chat with him in just a moment to find out about what has happened at the Supreme Court. We did see the rulings that came down today, not first, but the last one, I should say, today, was the birthright citizenship, which a lot of people were waiting to see what the ruling was on that.
Had a lot of curiosity and interest in our communities around the country because there are a lot of undocumented immigrants. No telling how many who have children who are birthright citizens. We had some comments that came in online earlier when we started talking about this. You want to read some of them to us? Share those with us? Yeah, Blanca says, can parents not here legally still get citizenship through their children born here? That's a very interesting question. Anecdotally, I would say yes, because kids can sponsor, the word is sponsor in quotes, their parents to become citizens. I've seen that happen. But in terms of legally, we'll have to ask our legal scholars about that. We do have him with us right now from UH Law Center, Seth Chandler, regular visitor to the program. Hello there, sir.
Good morning.
I don't think today's decision was a surprise necessarily, but interesting nonetheless.
No, it wasn't a surprise. I think the closeness of it actually was a surprise. I think most people felt it would be a larger majority opposing President Trump's order, and instead he got 3.5 votes. But the outcome, I think most people had predicted.
Yeah, and for folks that are just joining us and haven't heard everything today, basically what it says, and I know that there are carve-outs there, but you're born here in this country, you are a citizen of this country. Regardless if your parents are undocumented.
That's correct. Or whether your parents were just here on a tourist visa or here on temporary protected status or otherwise.
Chau, just a minute ago, was reading a question that had come in from Blanca, which said, can parents not here legally still get citizenship through their children born here legally? That seems to be an issue a lot of people are talking about. And so explain the legality of that.
Right. So it's probably best to talk to an immigration law specialist as opposed to a constitutional law specialist. But what I understand is that the Trump administration has made that quite difficult now by, first of all, requiring you to go back to your native country before receiving that sort of sponsorship. And secondly, if you had overstayed your visa, been a public charge, or otherwise taken action, it's within the rights of the consular agent in that country to deny your quest for legal permanent residency, even as a preview of becoming a citizen.
But the Supreme Court decision today was not addressing the horrible term that we often use, anchor baby idea. It was about birth. Being born here makes you the citizen. That's what they were.
That's correct. It says that unless you are the child of a diplomat, or you are a pregnant occupying force in the United States, a very slim category, you are a citizen of the United States.
The surprise in the dissents. Talk a little bit about what the dissents were based on. Granted, it wasn't a massive dissent, being only 3 dissents, but or 3.5, depending on how you count it. What does it say there? What were their legal arguments?
Yeah, first, I'm going to take issue with not massive. Justice Thomas's opinion is 91 pages of a dissent, which is the longest dissent in at least recent Supreme Court history. But it's very interesting dissents. They focus not so much on what most people focus on, which is the children of illegally present persons, but on the children of parents who are here temporarily. Say you were from Ukraine and you have temporary protected status and you have a child. The dissent really focused on how the Constitution did not require us to make those children citizens, how the Supreme Court's precedents didn't require us to make those people's children citizens, and how since therefore most of President Trump's order, or at least a good chunk of President Trump's order, was constitutional, the court should not have struck the entire thing down. That was the main thrust of at least 2 of the dissents.
Okay, and you talked about a half vote. Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, the half is Justice Kavanaugh. Justice Kavanaugh says that as a matter of constitutional law, the dissenters have the better part of the argument, that the Constitution doesn't require these children to be citizens of the United States. But Congress has, as with respect to American Indians, and can expand citizenship. And he read a 1950s statute as having expanded U.S. citizenship to include the kind of people that President Trump was targeting. The reason this matters is that if Justice Kavanaugh had gotten his way, which he did not, but if he had gotten his way, then Congress could come back and say, as President Trump apparently now wants to do, that, okay, I failed the first time, but let's now pass a statute saying that children of temporary visitors or children of illegally present persons are not citizens of the United States. So that's why it's a half.
Let me ask about that. We asked with Andrew Schneider in the last hour a very similar question, so walk me through this. My understanding is now, even if we pass laws that say that there are regulations on who is born here, who becomes a citizen, that because the Supreme Court has said the Constitution, through amendments, has said that is not valid. If you are born here, you are a citizen. The only way to really alter that is through a constitutional amendment, not just another law. Is that accurate or
inaccurate? Yes, Ernie, I agree with that. I've been trying to think about this issue a little bit because the president has, one of his Truth Social posts has said, okay, this was a setback, but it's easy to fix. We don't need a constitutional amendment. And I don't really know what he has in mind. For better or worse, the Supreme Court's ruling was quite broad. And it quite clearly says that when the Constitution says all persons born or naturalized in the United States are citizens of the United States, that it really means all persons. Mm-hmm. And I don't see an easy way for the president or Congress to get around that.
Yeah. 713-440-8870. We are talking with University of Houston Law Center expert on the Constitution and the Supreme Court, and here helping us understand all of this, Seth Chandler. If you have questions, give us a call. Another decision that came down today that I think some people are curious about, may not fully understand, is what's being looked at as the transgender athlete decision. Talk to us a little bit about what it actually says.
Right. So the Supreme Court upheld statutes from West Virginia and Idaho that said that effectively a person who was born male but had transitioned to female could not play in women's sports. They said, first of all, that a federal statute, Title IX, did not require that outcome, did not require the states to let trans women participate in girls' sports, and that the Equal Protection Clause of the Constitution didn't require it either. That is, even if this was sex discrimination, the government had a good enough reason for engaging it in order to protect the safety and competitiveness of women's sports, and that there was no requirement that you look at it on sort of a kid-by-kid basis. Is this, are we talking about the 6'4" Leah Thomas situation, or some kid who had transitioned fairly early in life and therefore might not have developed the male musculature that might give them an advantage in women's sports?
And if I'm not mistaken, it is basically, it's not making, and correct me where I'm wrong here in my understanding of this, it's not making a law. What it's saying is states have the right to pass laws about this issue.
Yes, I believe that's correct. And let me just caveat that by saying I had like a 300-page reading assignment this morning. Yes. And my belief is that that's exactly right, that it would not prohibit a state from permitting trans women to participate in women's sports, but there is certainly no statutory requirement that they do so, nor is there a constitutional requirement that they do so. And therefore, Idaho, West Virginia, and, although it wasn't a party to the case, Texas, are within their rights in saying trans women can't play in women's sports.
Now, does the opposite apply? Trans men transitioning from men to women?
Yes, that would be a rarity, I would say. You could have a particularly athletic trans man who wanted to participate in men's sports. And I believe the court's decision would say neither Title IX nor the Constitution requires a state to permit that.
Let me also ask, I'm going to switch topics on us again. So I'm checking your reading ability this morning and how fast you could get through everything. Campaign finance reform. What did we see in this one?
Okay, so get out your checkbook. If you have $500,000 available to you, you can now donate it to a political party with full confidence that the political party is going to use it to help candidate X of that party, and that the law passed during the Watergate era that had prevented that was an unconstitutional violation of the First Amendment. So that the court basically overturned a prior decision in which it said that the law was permissible, and now has ruled that you can, in fact, give up to about $500,000, as I understand it, to the party, and the party can, in coordination with the candidate, spend that to promote the Senator John Smith for President fund.
Is this based along the same school of thought that corporations are individuals, and so a party is also an individual?
I think it's based on a broad understanding that in order to effectively engage in speech in the modern world, you need money, and that the court felt that there was not enough danger of corruption from this sort of donation to justify a prohibition on the practice given our First Amendment guarantees of free speech. That is, I very quickly looked at the decision, appears to be what they ruled.
Okay, I'm going to take you back a few days then. So you had more time to read and digest this decision. We're talking about the mail-in voting count, and that they decided that it was permissible to receive ballots that were postmarked by Election Day up to 5 days after in this particular statute. It doesn't clear, if I'm understanding this correctly, any amount of days. All they've done is said within a 5-day period, that's permissible. If some state has a 15-day count or something like that, that this doesn't necessarily cover that. Is that accurate?
I believe that's accurate. I would not swear to that, though.
Yeah. And good or bad, was this a surprise decision on the mail-in voting from the way you read the court?
Honestly, it was not a case to which I had given a great amount of attention prior to the ruling. It's just not one of the 50 that I focused on going forth. So.
Speaking of that, of the 50 you focused on, what's something big we're missing that we're not talking about?
You're missing a big case.
Here you go.
There is a big case. There, people focus on birthright citizenship, and no doubt that's important. And people focus on the trans athletes issue. No doubt that's important. But actually, the biggest case was earlier this week, and it's a case called Trump versus Slaughter, in which the Supreme Court said that that Congress cannot create agencies in which the president is denied the right to fire people that he doesn't care for. He doesn't need any real reason to do it, other than that he doesn't like their policies. The reason that is so important is that Congress, believing that the president couldn't just put his people into these agencies like the Federal Trade Commission or the Federal Communications Commission or the Nuclear Regulatory Commission or all the other things that end in commission, Congress, believing that the president couldn't capture those agencies, delegated huge amounts of power to them so that they became a fourth branch of government. And what the Supreme Court did earlier this week in a case called Trump versus Slaughter is to say, well, those statutes are probably okay, but the president can replace people who he doesn't care for politically. And so what this does, as Justice Gorsuch says, is to say, oh, we have a fourth branch of government, but now the president controls it. In my opinion, this is a huge deal, and it will be very difficult for Congress to claw back power because the president is just going to veto whatever Congress comes up with.
My understanding of it, and correct me where I'm wrong here, is that the reason that this holds water, this decision, is these are agencies that fall under the executive branch, and because the president is the head of the executive, he is entitled to control his agencies beneath him, as opposed to like the Federal Trade Commission, which is outside of the executive branch, and therefore that was the carve-out of why he couldn't replace the Fed chair.
Not quite so much. No,
Okay.
I'm going to say that's not quite right.
All right, please.
The prior law before this week was that for things that were clearly in the executive branch, the Secretary of Health and Human Services or the Attorney General, that the president could fire those people without any reason whatsoever. I don't like their face, I don't like their policies, whatever. With respect, but what the Supreme Court had ruled back in 1935 was that Congress could create what were called independent agencies, things like the Federal Trade Commission, things like the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, where, although the president would get to select the people to be on them, there would nonetheless be limits. There were limits of how many members from each party could be on them. There would be limits. There would be terms that were longer than the president's term, 5-year terms, 15-year terms. And critically, the president couldn't just fire them for political reasons. So what the court did yesterday or earlier this week in 2 decisions was to say that the 1935 decision was wrong, that the president has to be able to fire these people because under the Constitution, under the first sentence, all executive power is vested in the President of the United States, and these people are exercising executive power. The carve-out that remains that you mentioned is for the Fed, where the court said the Fed is different because of history, because of the way that the first and second banks of the United States were set up, and that, moreover, before he fired someone, Lisa Cook in this instance, he needed to have some sort of process to hear her side of the story so she could establish that her mortgage fraud wasn't real or her mortgage fraud was before she became a Fed chair or there was no mortgage fraud, and that he had denied her that process.
So much to unpack. So much. Seth Chandler, always a joy having you on to help us understand the stuff that we can get so lost in, and you make it so clear. Thank you for joining us.
My pleasure.
Okay, that's Seth Chandler. He's a University of Houston Law Center expert who was here to talk Supreme Court rulings on us, but we're just getting going in this hour. Coming up next, more criminal justice. We're going to talk about insanity defense that's now being floated in the Luigi Mangione case. All that and more coming up on Hello Houston right after this.
PBS Drama on
We know you value Houston Public Media. That's why you're watching right now. So take the next step and become a new member of the station you rely on. Every gift makes a difference. And what matters most right now is supporting the station that brings you the news and information you rely on. It only takes a minute to make a big difference. So join as a new member today at houstonpublicmedia.org/donate or call 800-364-8300.
The Supreme Court ends its session with major decisions. One affirmed that people born in the U.S., including to undocumented migrants, are American citizens.
Another ruling allows states to ban transgender athletes from women's high school and college sports teams. Reporting and analysis next time Here and Now.
Here and Now begins at 1 this afternoon on News 88.7.
We tend to think about these Supreme Court decisions in terms of President Trump and what can he do in the moment, but these rulings will outlast him, and this power will apply to whoever is in the White House and will be very long-lasting.
I'm Michael Barbaro. That's Today on the Daily from the New York Times.
And that's coming up this evening at 7.
Want to binge All Creatures Great and Small, catch up on Nova, or revisit Ken Burns documentaries? You can with PBS Passport. With a gift of $5 or more per month to Houston Public Media, you'll get access to PBS Passport that lets you watch your favorite programs anytime you want. Support the programs you love and enjoy them on your own schedule with PBS Passport. Make your gift now at houstonpublicmedia.org/donate.
And now back to Hello Houston. To comment on today's topics, call or text 713-440-8870 or email us at talk@hellohouston.org. Now here's Ernie Manous and guest host Chau Nguyen.
The legal insanity defense is one of the most widely recognized and misunderstood defense strategies in the criminal justice system. Recent attention is surrounding the decision not to pursue a psychiatric defense in the Luigi Mangione case, along with the 25th anniversary of the Andrea Yates murder. She murdered her 5 children, and its verdict years later has renewed interest in how these defenses have evolved over time. Joining us now to discuss the history of the insanity defense, how psychological defenses are used in criminal cases, and how public perception has changed, is Sandra Guerra Thompson. She is a professor of law and former director of the Criminal Justice Institute at the University of Houston Law Center. Sandra, welcome to Hello Houston. A lot of talk about insanity defense. What is your take on it in light of the recent high-profile case and former cases like Andrea Yates coming to light in the wake of her anniversary?
Well, I would say that this defense is and probably always has been a very difficult one to win for a defendant. So when we, regardless of the facts of the case or the person's state of mind, if they're raising this defense, it's probably because there's nothing else.
You said it's highly improbable. What do you mean by that? How is it difficult to get an insanity defense case in the courts and to win?
Well, there are a number of problems. So, to prevail in this case, and by the way, most of the people who raise this kind of defense have a medical history of suffering from some kind of paranoid delusions, and they're typically very, very mentally ill. And I would just start out by saying that most people with mental illness are not dangerous, and in fact are much more likely to be victims of crime. But some people do have this very severe mental illness, and nonetheless, it's hard to prevail because, for 2 reasons. One is just getting jurors to accept that people can be this mentally ill is difficult. But also, I think the way we administer the defense, we don't tell jurors what will happen if they acquit somebody on grounds of insanity. And most people are worried about deciding, a case, deciding that someone is insane, and then having that person be released and harming more people in the future. They don't want that responsibility.
Let me just take you a step back for us to understand it. Legally, what is the legal definition of insanity? What are we talking about from a legal point of view when we use this term?
Well, so the traditional and most widely applied defense, and the one that we see in Texas, turns on whether you are able to show that the defendant did not understand the difference between right and wrong because they have a severe mental illness.
So do they define what the mental illnesses have to be, or is it simply the judgment of what the jury will decide as if they could determine the difference between right and wrong?
Right, exactly. So typically what you have are the defense as well as the prosecution will bring in psychological experts, psychiatrists, who will testify to the state of mind of the defendant. And they will frequently differ in their opinions on whether the person is able or unable to appreciate, to differentiate right from wrong. I mean, of course, it's a legal test of insanity that isn't necessarily reflected in what psychiatrists, how they define mental illness, right? So this is a purely legal concept, but we do get experts in to try to guide the jury on that question.
But I guess then, to stay with this for just 1 second more, I would assume anyone then who breaks the law and thinks they did the right thing would fall into this category. I killed them, but that was the right thing for me to do. You obviously don't know the difference between right and wrong. I've proven insanity.
Well, yes, but only if you can also establish that the reason you're unable to distinguish those is because you suffer from a very serious mental illness.
Pre-existing?
Pre-existing, yeah. I mean, typically, yes, that's what we have to show is some kind of history. Again, because jurors are going to be reluctant to find someone to be insane unless they're shown some kind of proof of a history.
I want to take you back to the Andrea Yates case since we mentioned it in our brief introduction, that it's been 25 years since she murdered her 5 very young children and drowned them in bathtubs, laid them out in the bed, called the police and said, I just killed my kids, had a psychotic, had a history of psychosis and a history of mental illness. Now, a jury did find her guilty of capital murder, but her attorney sought a new trial and sought the insanity offense, in which he prevailed. To this day, Andrea is still institutionalized. She does not elect to get out of parole. She is one of those unique and devastating tragic cases that we still think about because this insanity case, in which you say is so rare, prevailed here. And it sounds like it checks all the marks that we've been talking about. That she had a history of mental illness, she had a psychotic breakdown. And like you said, Arnie, at the time, she believed that she killed her kids because it was the right thing to do. She, she was off her medication, her antipsychotics at the time. And she heard voices, and those voices told her to murder her children.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's correct. And it's a fascinating case because despite that history, as you noted, she was convicted at her first trial. And, looking back on the history of the trials in that case, at that first trial, she was not in an institution, in a psychiatric institution. She was not receiving treatment. She was in the Harris County Jail. And when she appeared at her trial, she was reportedly looking catatonic, and she showed no emotion when photographs of her children being killed, who were dead, were shown in court. She didn't react to any of the testimony, and I think that that was evidence of her illness, but at the same time, I think it was terrifying to jurors. The idea of acquitting someone on grounds of insanity who appeared remorseless. But in her second trial, she was getting treatment. When she saw all the evidence and the photographs, this time she showed the kind of emotion you expect from a mother. And she was very well represented in that trial and ultimately was acquitted on grounds of insanity. But it was ironic because she was in a healthier state of mind in her second trial.
I want to get back to the word you just mentioned, acquitted. Does the insanity defense acquit you, or are you still accountable for the crime?
Well, it depends on the jurisdiction. Some jurisdictions do have verdicts of guilty but mentally ill. Most do not. Most jurisdictions, you are found not guilty by reason of insanity. And the reason for that is that we view insanity as a person being ill and committing an act because of their illness. And so the theory here, right, the underlying doctrine is, well, you don't want to punish someone because they're sick. And so we excuse them, even though we know that they did do this harmful thing. It's like if you're driving a car, you run somebody over, but it's because your brakes failed. We're not going to punish a person for that. It's not voluntary, right? And likewise here.
And likewise, Andrea Yates is institutionalized. Every year when she comes up for parole, she elects not to be considered for release.
That brings me to another point, too, for people to understand. The penalty, even if you are found mentally ill or insane, what actually is the penalty then? Is it oftentimes, as we see in Hollywood movies, oh, you get to go home or you're under hospital treatment? Where do these folks go?
Yeah, that's a great question. And this is what I'm saying. I think it's very hard to prevail on a defense like this because the jury isn't explained. So what would typically happen is that the person would be committed to a psychiatric hospital, a secure facility, where they would not be allowed to leave, unless they are found to have been fully, rehabilitated, where they're well now. But that is not usually going to happen anytime soon for people with this kind of long-term mental illness. And, if the government thinks that a person remains a danger to themselves or others, they can have that person civilly committed. But again, it's not punishment, right? It's not a penalty. It's just actions that we take, that society is justified in taking to protect the person and to protect other people.
We're speaking with Sandra Garrett-Thompson. She is the professor of law and former director of the Criminal Justice Institute at the University of Houston Law Center. If you would like to join in on this very interesting conversation, please call or text us 713-440-8870. Now, all eyes right now, Ms. Thompson, are on the Luigi Mangione case. He is the young man who is accused of murdering a healthcare executive in New York City, considering the psychiatric insanity defense. It looks like when we talk about the Yates case that we're comparing apples to oranges here. Andrea Yates had a history of psychosis, had 5 children, had tried to commit suicide. Mangione, by some reports, was suffering from a back injury and had written some manifestos about the health insurance industry and his disdain over it. What are your thoughts?
Well, I mean, I think if in the Mangione case, if there's no history of mental illness there, then I think it's very hard to make an argument, right? That just could sound more like anger and killing someone out of resentment, out of frustration, and that's not insanity. So we would have to have some. Again, typically what you see is a history of paranoid delusions and people feeling like, or in like Andrea Yates's case, where there is some sort of deific decree, right? Like God is telling me to do this or that. But delusions of some sort. And I don't know if that exists in his case or not.
Speaking of paranoid delusions, though, could that be categorized as a mental illness?
Having delusions?
Yes, paranoid delusions. Could you say he had paranoid delusions that if he didn't take this gentleman out, that it would harm more individuals? He was doing the right thing. He believed it was right. Or does the planning, the conceiving of it, the laying in wait, the hiding after the fact destroy the defense?
Well, and even that's where this can be really difficult, right? So typically the defense requires a total lack of understanding, and in reality, most people have some understanding of reality. Even Andrea Yates, called the police. And the government in her case used the argument, right, that, well, she knew this was a police matter. And so it's not always so clear cut and so black and white with how their thinking is. But just having hostility towards another person and feeling compelled to do something because you're angry is not a mental illness. Now, a delusion is when you believe something is real that actually isn't. And I don't know, like I say, I don't know if he was suffering from delusions, but if he was, then that would qualify as a mental illness. I mean, again, that's not my area of expertise, but But that's my understanding legally.
Yeah.
And just to remind everyone, too, we are talking about a case that has not yet been tried. We're talking about issues that have been brought out in the press. And so a bit of a hypothetical discussion we're having here based in legal understandings of a situation.
You know, the world is also following the case of Nick Reiner, accused of murdering his parents. Nick supposedly has a history of mental illness, paranoid schizophrenia. Might have been off his medication. Those might fit those parameters that we talk about, Professor Thompson. A lot of cases when it comes to symptoms of paranoid schizophrenia, bipolar, could be paranoid delusion. So a lot to talk about here in insanity defense, and a lot more to wait and see.
Thank you very much.
That's right.
Thank you for joining us and for helping give us some clarity on all of this fascinating topic.
All right. Sandra Guerra Thompson is the professor of law and former director of the Criminal Justice Institute at U of H Law Center. Sandra, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you both.
Coming up, another installment of Texperts. Stay with us as Hello Houston continues.
It's not just your car. It's the one that brought your kids home from school, took you cross-country, held memories, laughter, even a few breakdowns. When it's time to let go, give your car a new purpose. Donate it and turn memories into meaningful support for this station. Plus, you'll enjoy free and easy pickup, potential tax benefits, and a simple donation process. Your gift supports the programs you and your family love. Donate today and help keep public media strong. Call or donate online.
Stories of the women of the revolution.
There would be, so many women who were actually involved in such an important role in the colonies.
A history of the female publishers, spies, and fighters of early America. That's next time on Think.
Join us for Think tonight at 11.
On the TED Radio Hour, online shopper Aparna Mehta used to get a lot of packages delivered to her door.
Oh, per week? 12, 15. Whoa! Sorry, but I didn't think I was doing anything wrong. Look, the store is making it possible for me to order as many as I want and return back what I don't want.
Shopping and the state of fashion. That's next time on the TED Radio Hour from NPR.
And that's coming up tonight at 10.
The upcoming 4th of July weekend is expected to set travel records. U.S. airlines are carrying more passengers than ever. It's all testing the limits of the aviation system.
It's clear that the biggest threat to healthy and competitive airline industry, it's our short-staffed and woefully antiquated air traffic control system.
I'm Scott Detrow. Hear that story on the next All Things Considered from NPR News.
All Things Considered begins this afternoon at 3 on News 88.7.
And now back to Hello Houston. To comment on today's topics, call or text 713-440-8870 or email us at talk@hellohouston.org. Now here's Ernie Manous and guest host Chau Nguyen.
Food trucks are everywhere in Texas, but for years operating one meant navigating a maze of local permits, inspections, and fees every time a truck crossed into a new city. Well, starting tomorrow, July 1st, all that will change with a new Texas law that creates a single statewide health permit for food trucks rather than a patchwork of city-by-city licensing. In today's episode of Texperts, Brandon Rottinghaus, co-host of Houston Public Media's Party Politics, explores this new law and what its supporters and critics are saying about it. Here's Texperts.
Welcome to Texperts, Houston Public Media's short primers on Texas government. I'm Brandon Rottinghaus, a political science professor at the University of Houston.
Food trucks. That's right. Tacos from trailers, gourmet grilled cheese, barbecue from a converted Airstream, the mobile kitchens that fuel Texas festivals, breweries, football games, and frankly, half of my bad decisions after 10 p.m. But behind every food truck serving brisket queso fries is something much less delicious: permitting bureaucracy. And the Texas lawmakers have decided that they've had just about enough. Starting July 1st, Texas is launching a statewide food truck permit system that dramatically changes how mobile food vendors operate across the state. And depending on who you ask, this is either a huge win for small business, a dangerous loss of local control, or the most Texas policy fight imaginable. Before this law, operating a food truck in Texas meant navigating what could only be described as a regulatory scavenger hunt. Want to sell tacos in Dallas? Get a permit. Now head to Fort Worth? Different permit. College Station? Different inspection. Austin? Completely different paperwork. Food truck owners often had to repeat nearly identical health inspections in every city they entered, even though the safety standards were mostly the same statewide. That meant more fees, more inspections, more downtime, and a lot less actual taco selling. One Bryan area food truck owner reportedly pays about $2,400 per year just in permits across multiple cities. The law that the state passed basically says, what if we just stop doing that? And politically, that's part of why this issue gained such bipartisan sympathy. Because people who disagree about regulatory philosophy tend to agree that duplicative bureaucracy is inefficient. Last year, the Texas legislature passed House Bill 2844, authored by Republican State Representative Brooks Landgraf of Odessa. The basic idea is simple. Instead of a city-by-city licensing system, Texas will now issue one statewide permit for mobile food vendors. One permit, one inspection, anywhere in Texas. That statewide license has to be administered through the Texas Department of State Health Services, DSHS. The state estimates roughly 19,000 food trucks will eventually operate under this system. And notably, cities still retain authority over zoning, parking, fire codes, and where the trucks can physically operate. So this law doesn't eliminate local regulations entirely. It's mainly centralizing the health permitting process. Of course, not everyone's celebrating with breakfast tacos. Several cities and counties strongly oppose the bill. Why? Two big reasons. First, money. Second, local control. Cities currently collect substantial permit revenue from food trucks. Austin reportedly generated about $600,000 from food truck permits in fiscal year 2025. Amarillo estimated approximately $185,000 annually. Now that revenue largely disappears. Georgetown's mayor framed the debate slightly differently as part of a larger and broader political struggle. Local authority versus state preemption. And that's one of the most important trends in modern Texas governance. Over the last decade, the Texas legislature has increasingly overridden local governments on a range of issues, including ride sharing, oil and gas, environmental rules, labor policy, and unhomed ordinances. And now, food trucks. So yes, even taco permits are part of a larger constitutional and political debate in Texas. We talked to someone who knows about the business of food trucks, Jafar Hajar, the owner-operator of Fuzzy's Pizza in Katy. Not only does he make a great pizza, but he's also a proud UH alum and a former student of mine. Jafar Hajar, welcome to Texperts.
Thank you for having me.
Hey, appreciate the efforts, and I'm a huge fan of the pizza, obviously, and so this is a great chance for us to talk about food trucks.
Amazing. My favorite topic is food.
Yeah, and speaking of, you started the process of looking into doing a food truck, and so I want to talk a little bit about your journey there.
Yeah. So I've grown up with the business. We've had, my Uncle Fuzzy started Fuzzy's back in 84. My parents started the one in Katy in 95. So I've grown up with food and pizza my entire life. And in 2023, I had a hankering to have like a mobile, like deep dish kind of like express kind of, concept. So I started Fuzzy's Express, but my budget was limited at that time. So I had to work with what I had. And there was a lady who had a daiquiri food truck that she started in 2020 because the governor allowed like alcohol sales to go during COVID. So it was like a really lucrative opportunity for a lot of people to kind of get into that business because TABC strictly refused like alcohol sales to go from restaurants unless it was from a grocery or a retailer or whatever. So to stimulate the economy, the governor was like, okay. So she started it and then she did it for like a year or so and then she kind of gave up on it. But she was permitted through Harris County. So no issues whatsoever. I mean, it was a fully licensed daiquiri truck. But pizza's different than daiquiris. So my concept was pizza. And the thing is, I couldn't prepare it on board because number one, the truck was too small. Number two, I already had a restaurant, so I kind of had the kind of advantage that other people don't, because it kind of function as like a de facto commissary, where you can kind of prepare food in a licensed establishment. And then essentially my concept was kind of like how when you go to Starbucks, whenever you go, you buy like a turkey, bacon, egg, and cheese sandwich. They're not cooking it there for you. They're kind of pulling it out of a frozen packet, and they're reheating it in these like intricate ovens that they had, and then they're serving it to you hot. And essentially, it's like a fully cooked product that's frozen. So that's what I did, and I thought I could get licensed by Harris. Well, first I wanted City of Houston, and that was horrible. The amount of requirements that they had for you to get licensed in the City of Houston, because like my goal was deep dish to go in the downtown Med Center area. I'm like, this is perfect for the lunch crowd. Well, City of Houston gave me a packet this thick of things they needed the food truck to be compliant with, and I was like, I probably need to shell out maybe another $200,000 to Plan B, Harris County. So Harris County was a lot less strict on the things that they needed, but they were still really strict. They wanted, certain diameters for how big the sink was. They wanted certain septic tanks and this and that. At the end of the day, the inspector didn't bite with my concept. She was like, no, you're not Starbucks. You can't just reheat food and sell it. I'm like, it's the same thing. How is it different from Starbucks? It's frozen and I'm reheating it. They were like, yeah, but... And I was like, if I was a big company, I'd have more leeway. But so I started county shopping. I was like, which county has the least stringent requirements? And it was Montgomery County. It was because it was the closest thing to me. Because the thing is, like, when you have a food truck, you can only operate in the county that you're licensed with. The moment you kind of go outside of those county limits, you're in for a world of hurt when you're operating without a license. So Montgomery County was less strict, and I failed the first time because I didn't have the right pipes, which it's not like they're easy. So I know I'm not trying to say that, but I got licensed the second time. I got the permit and everything, and we had Fuzzy's Express out in the Woodlands. And it was a fun journey, but, driving from Katy to the Woodlands every day and taking 45 and 99 it was mental exhaustion.
Yeah, that is definitely a fully different podcast. But I think this is fascinating to hear kind of just the journey to see how this might operate. And I'm wondering from you, given your experiences, do you think that this new statewide licensing system will make it easier for established restaurants like Fuzzy's to experiment with new models of service?
Absolutely. I think because right now the new law essentially is kind of like a one shoe, one permit fits all right now. So you get licensed through the department in Austin. So you have to take your truck out there, and then the inspectors pretty much, check off all the boxes. And I was looking at the permit paperwork, and they're not as difficult as like the City of Houston was. So I think, yes, a lot of restaurants are probably going to jump on the opportunity to buy a food truck and then kind of have like a pop-up location if their concept supports it. Because, like certain like dishes, like for example, sushi, I think that's something that you're going to want to like sit down and eat, or like sizzling hot fajitas. I'm going to want some chips and queso with that, it's going to be a hard sell for to go. But pizza, yes.
Pizza's easy. Well, hey, I really appreciate you talking with us and taking the time to discuss your journey. And this is going to be helpful for people's concepts of the way that the system is and could be.
Yeah, I mean, I'm excited to see what concepts are going to roll out, no pun intended.
Thanks for listening to Texperts, and thanks to everybody, cast and crew here at Houston Public Media, for making it happen.
That was Brandon Rottinghaus, University of Houston political science professor and co-host of Houston Public Media's Party Politics. He spoke with Jafar Hajar, who's the owner of Fuzzy's Pizza in Katy. And remember, all episodes of Texperts are available to listen to on our website. Just go to houstonpublicmedia.org and search for Texperts. That easy. And that brings us to the end of the show. Chau, I have to say that last segment makes me hungry, so I'm ready to go have lunch.
Me too.
All right, so we're going to go off and do that, but we hope you'll be back with us. Thank you for listening today and watching online, but we'll be back tomorrow with more conversation, including the latest on SNAP benefits, right here on Hello Houston, here on News 88.7. Have a great day.
Thanks for listening to Hello Houston. Join us every Monday through Friday from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. to talk all things Houston. The Hello Houston production team includes Garrett Bowman, William Menjivar, Jen Altide, Todd Holslander, and Jim Kovacic. For the latest in local news, subscribe to the Hello Houston daily newsletter at HoustonPublicMedia.org. Hello Houston is a production of Houston Public Media. The opinions expressed by the guests of this program are solely their own and do not represent the views of management, staff, or underwriters of Houston Public Media. This is News 88.7.
This week on This American Life, we stand on four corners.